Douglas Murray.
Well, it's a very difficult issue. What the Allied forces and NATO forces are trying to do through this technique is to pretty much replicate what happened in Iraq, that brought Iraq from the brink of civil war to the pretty much stabilized country it currently is. And that's the following. In Iraq, it was the so-called Sunni awakening, where the Allies managed to hive off those people who were paid insurgents, who were, as it were, not ideological militants, and to bring those people away from the ideological militants. That's the same technique that's now being suggested in Afghanistan, that those people who've joined the Taliban for non-ideological reasons can be hived away from the ideological Taliban. Now, that's not going to be a swift tactic. It's not going to show success necessarily fast, but if what happened in Iraq is replicated, it will be successful in the long term.
And even if these people have been blowing up British soldiers at the roadside, you wouldn't object to them receiving money to stop fighting?
Well, I object to it very much, but I also know that as a pragmatist on these issues, we have to also look at what we can do to bring Afghanistan back to some kind of state of normality, and it's not easy, and anyone who tells you it is fooling.
This helps bring a lasting peace to Afghanistan. It has to be worth doing, and it's not simply, David, as you implied, handing over a bung or a bribe to Taliban fighters. It's about investing in economic development, in land, so that they can convert to farming, in helping the economic development, as Douglas says, to get those non-ideological, non-Al-Qaeda fighters away from Al-Qaeda. And that's the only hope for Afghanistan. If we don't do anything, you know, Afghanistan was a breeding ground for terrorism. The September the 11th attacks, the July the 7th attacks in London were planned and orchestrated from that region.
What you don't already have? We don't have the money to invest.
It depends how much your security matters.
And is it not a fact of life? There is always going to be terrorism. There is always going to be terror. Oh, you can't eradicate.
In Afghanistan, you mean?
Anywhere in the world, there will always be terrorism.
Give up and just allow everyone to bomb you.
We don't have the resources. We cannot be the solution to the world's problems.
No, but this is our problem.
Hold on, Douglas. The woman with black hair there, please.
What we've got to do, I would have a strategy. Go back to the drawing board. How are we going to reduce the threat of Al-Qaeda and Islamic terrorism? And I have a threefold strategy. First of all, to some extent we are doing, and that is those governments like the government of Pakistan who are prepared to fight the Al-Qaeda there, to give them money to help them there, much less is needed, but they're doing the job, and also give them the intelligence they need. Beyond that, airstrikes. We have to be prepared to use airstrikes, and we have to be prepared to use subversion on the ground. With the three-pronged policy along those lines, then I think we can make some progress in reducing, and of course doing the right things here, because a lot of the Al-Qaeda threat is a threat from this country and Europe.
A lot of it comes from here, and a lot of it comes from training camps in that region. Now, people have to be honest. If you don't want our troops to be there fighting on the ground, village by village, you have to say that what you would like are, for instance, more air drone attacks, bombing from 40,000 feet. This means, among other things, you will have far, far more civilian deaths, and then we'll be blamed for that as well. I mean, at least take those deaths on your back.
All right.
Thing to do was to take that life support system away from the economy now.
Douglas Murray.
No, I can't agree at all. I think we don't just need tinkering with public spending cuts. We need really quite savage cuts to public spending for there to be any seriousness of this or any future government. The amount of waste that this government already does, it spends millions of pounds, apart from anything else, advertising to us about what we should do. Straight away a cut. It spends £90 million on the so-called Equalities Commission, £90 million cut straight there. This goes on and on. What is happening at the moment is that the politicians are simply not being honest with us. We cannot keep on spending at these levels. It's no good for David Cameron to say he'll compete with Labour on NHS spending and so on. They have to be honest at some point. As it is, what is happening is that this nation is like a drunk man who, instead of recognising at some point he's going to have to get a hangover, has just had the hair of the dog. At some point we are going to have to go through this hangover, and spending cuts like this really are no way to... spending cuts, just ignoring them as they're doing, and to have this same competition on the centre ground from all the political parties that are saying effectively the same thing. They pretend, Labour and the Conservatives pretend that there are significant differences between them. There really are.
But Ben Bradshaw says every country in the world and the UN, goodness knows, anyone you care to name, recommends this. That everybody's right.
I don't care.
The same thing.
I mean,
I don't. You don't care? Okay, I'll come back to you. Jenny Tong. You agree with that?
Well, no. It does strike me, though, when Jenny Tong talks about how much she'd like to interrogate Tony Blair, that she exercises a different scale of values in London than she would, say, when she's meeting the head of Hamas in Damascus last year and praising the head of a terrorist group whose organisation carries out terrorist atrocities, which are genuine breaches of international law, every single opportunity it has.
What about Fallujah in Iraq?
Well,
what about Fallujah, Douglas?
You talk about prosecuting. You talk about Tony Blair facing it. When you sit down with somebody like Khalid Mashal, you praise him.
Fallujah, I did not praise him.
You said,
I said
I've got his comments here.
He was worth talking to, and he was actually quite.
You said he was shrewd, plausible, and actually very likely.
All right, let's get back to the question.
I can show it to you.
All right, no, Douglas, maybe, Jenny.
But if maybe get back onto
maybe afterwards.
And we need to uphold international law. That is my main point.
Jenny Tong, you've made your point.
I wish you told Karen Michel.
Douglas Murray, can you answer the question?
The fact is that the international law debate on this is, unfortunately, a terrible red herring. The fact is that the decision on when this country and our allies go to war is not decided by international law. International law is evolving. People disagree on it. As we saw this week, even the Attorney General disagrees with himself and changes his opinions on it. That's because this is an evolving body of law. And for people who think that all we need now is to, as it were, prove the Iraq war was illegal, I just say the following things to you. The Kosovo intervention that saved 1 million ethnic Albanian lives was an illegal venture. The Bosnian intervention by the UN was an illegal... Sierra Leone was an illegal venture by any of these things. So the idea that all we have to do here is to say that Iraq was illegal, Tony Blair's guilty, this actually addresses none of the important points. There are all sorts of disagreements about Iraq. People like me who supported the intervention are unlikely to change our minds, and many people who oppose it are unlikely to change theirs. But we should try, I think, honestly, as a country, to try to get beyond this debate. Try to get beyond the debate of basically vilification to the point at which people will only be happy once Tony Blair is in the dock and convicted. That isn't going to happen. Right. We should look at where Iraq is now, help Iraq now, and try to make sure, where there were mistakes made, that they can never be made again. But the kind of rhetoric that's going round about it really is not the way to stop a repeat. Just to get back to the question quickly, I mean, the issue of Freedom of Information Act and this, I mean, it is, I have to say, I mean, I have never worked in government, I've only ever watched with awe, really.
You have to speed up a bit.
But Ben Bradshaw, for him to say that FOIs sort of sort this out, actually all that happens with FOIs is that departments get rid of emails that might be incriminating before anyone can put in an FOI, or don't say anything in an email and do it around the coffee machine. There are substantial questions around this area, and I think that it is right. I'm very glad I have to say that Lord Lawson has set up his think tank, because there are very good reasons to try to put some balance back into this debate. It has got extraordinarily hysterical from the climate change lobby, and anything which goes this hysterical this fast should, I think, raise some question marks and have some kind of at least return to normal debate. It's very interesting to my mind. The climate change lobby really don't like that.
Jane Moore? Sorry, what did you interject? Hold on a second, I don't normally allow interjections, but I didn't
That used to mean something, being British, but it doesn't mean anything anymore. And you'd ask everybody in here, they'd understand that.
Douglas Murray.
You cannot deny that.
I think the swift answer to the question is, of course he was electioneering, that's his job this year. And we've got to be very careful as a public not to fall for the kind of procedural issues which the government and the press very often make these things into. Will the report be leaked? Will it come out? Will it not? That's actually not the issue. And as so often we're being shunted into a cul-de-sac when there is a much bigger issue. we're not just a broken society. We're a society in Britain that has been assaulted for decades now. We've been assaulted in our sense, apart from anything else, of who we are, what we are, whether we have a right to be as a nation. We've been subjected to decades of intense immigration, which has brought many benefits and many negatives. Many benefits and many negatives, but one of the other things it has done is to assault Britain and the British people as an identity. If you look back 4 or 5 decades now, what was it that Britain was signified by? What was it that epitomised Britain? It was institutions, the monarchy, Parliament, the army, the armed forces. All of these things have been assaulted and brought down one by one in recent years by government after government and elite after elite. What we see now in this society, which is just starting to wake up to this fact, is a government and others who are saying, we have pulled it down, can anyone help us put it back together? Okay. And what they will realise is what every small c, not big C, Conservative realises, which is that it is a lot easier to pull things down than it is to build them up. And this is going to take a long time. It isn't about one press release, it isn't even going to be about one term of a Conservative government, and it certainly isn't going to be about tinkering round the edges. We are going to need a revolutionary government to sort this out, and there are none on the horizon.